got to knock on the door of those guys and tell them that they were going to Canton and thank them for all they'd done and all they were going to do for the game, but also to promise that we would keep their legacy forever. And when we did that, it was immediate. They all cried. And I got to see their journey. When that happens, Joe, they're not thinking about how much money they're going to make or how much money they made or their Lombardis or their records. Every one of them was thinking about the mom that drove them to practice, or their dad that wouldn't let them quit, or the coach that inspired them to be more. And to me, that was something really special. And when we hit on this knock on the door thing, you could see how much it meant to them. And the truth is that everyone's got a legacy. You've got a legacy. Every one of your viewers has a legacy. And it may not be as a Hall of Fame football player having their bronze bust in Canton. It may be as a soldier. It may be as a leader. It may be as a husband or a mother, as a father.
Today's episode sponsor is Aditon, creators of Aditon Operations Kit, the military's go-to software for personnel and equipment accountability. AOK goes where you do, any network, anytime, any place. I got to know Aditon's co-founders, James and JJ, several years ago. They are former Army NCOs who have years of experience in the tech industry. They understand that most military jobs aren't performed behind a computer desk. Personnel and operations are distributed, but accountability of property is paramount to making mission. That's where Logi, AOK's equipment management software, comes into play. Formerly known as 92X, Logi is a next generation of equipment management for the military. Logi offers unrivaled features for military teams on the go. Ingest and digitize your primary and sub-hand receipts. Generate and share sub-hand receipts and DA forms with your team in just a few clicks. Capture photos, tags, and notes across your team to build context on the state of equipment. Get easy on-the-go access to critical property records. Logi is custom built for the modern military professional. It gives you your valuable time back so you can get back to the mission at hand at home or in the field. Whether you're doing monthly inventories or preparing for deployment, Logi is your pocket property book, giving you real-time visibility into equipment status and mission readiness. Logi is currently in use across the U.S. Army Special Forces, and it's expanding. For a limited time, listeners of the From the Green Notebook podcast can try out Logi for free. Visit aditonppbc.com/FTGN-Logi to get started. That's aditonppbc.com/FTGN-LOGE. I'm excited to announce we have our own FTGN merch store where you can rep From the Green Notebook gear with high quality shirts, hoodies, hats, water bottles, and more. We are partnering with X-Ray, a veteran-owned company, to bring you From the Green Notebook elevated performance apparel and casual gear on demand that is made right here in America. Not only will you look good wearing it, but you'll also help support the podcast. And you're going to love the quality of these shirts so much that you may decide to open a unit or team level store of your own, and you can. X-Ray offers free design services and creates dedicated web stores for units so you don't have to worry about taking orders, keeping money, or keeping an inventory on hand. Click on the link in the show notes to see our store, grab yourself a shirt, and then learn how to get your own store powered by X-Ray. How do I know what I think until I see what I say?
The Green Notebook, carried by military leaders around the world. Within those pages are sweat, tears, triumphs, and the hard-won lessons of life. Lessons worth sharing. Each week, the team dives into the notebooks of military leaders, business professionals, authors, athletes and coaches, and entertainers to share lessons and help you lead with the best version of yourself.
Welcome to another episode of From the Green Notebook on this very special Super Bowl weekend. I'm your host, Joe Byerly, and today we're diving into the Green Notebook of David Baker, the former president and executive director of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Now, recently, I had the chance to speak to 88 high school All-Americans along with the girls' high school flag football championship teams at the Military Appreciation Bowl. in Frisco, Texas. And while I was there, I had the opportunity to meet David Baker. Now, if you're not familiar with his name, you probably have seen him before. For years, David was the man behind something called The Knock, the moment when he delivered the life changing news to former athletes, coaches, and owners, letting them know they've been inducted into the Professional Football Hall of Fame. And if you've ever watched one of these moments on YouTube, you know that they are deeply emotional. So, in this interview, David and I sat down to talk about what it means and what it takes to be a Hall of Famer, not just on the sports field, but in life. And we also discuss how we can prepare our kids for the challenges that lie ahead so they can develop the character and resilience they need to succeed as adults. And this particular interview was very special for me because it was the first one my entire family was in the room for. And you'll hear David make mention of that a couple times in the episode. My hope is that you enjoy this episode as much as I did. David is a big guy to begin with, but he also has a huge personality and an even bigger heart. So grab your green notebooks and please welcome to the show, David Baker.
Joe, good to be with you.
I'm excited to spend a little bit of time with you. You've had an amazing career, and you're, I think, probably on your fourth, fifth, sixth career right now. But out of being the mayor of Irvine, being a league commissioner, and being a president director of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, which one of those jobs stands out to you as the most impactful?
You know, that's a great question, Joe, because I'll tell you what, I don't look at it as which one was the best. I kind of look at it as they were all part of the journey. And I think for each of us, I'm a faith-based guy, that I think that sometimes God gives us early challenges or early opportunities, and we learn those to set us up for the next opportunity. And you know, when I was, mayor of Irvine, it was a wonderful opportunity for to be a councilman there and a mayor, and to be a part of the first master plan city, and to understand how tax bases work and jobs work, and that cities and communities are more than just bridges and roads and infrastructure. There's also a spirit there that imbues that community and makes it what it is. And that's why, by the way, you know, when somebody goes on a run and they win a Super Bowl, the economics of that region improve substantially because everybody's feeling good. So they're going to invest more. They're going to take some more risk. They want to do something. So I learned a lot about that. Then when I went to, I bought an arena football team. It wasn't my intention to be a commissioner of the Arena Football League, but they needed somebody. I kind of drifted in there. It was a void, and that's how it sometimes happens in leadership. But Jerry Jones became a mentor to me. I got to spend a lot of time with Roger Goodell. We had dinner once a month for 10 years before he became commissioner. Paul Tagliabue's was right-hand guy. I got to spend time with Lamar Hunt and Wellington Mara and Dan Rooney and some of the guys who built this game, Bud Adams, Al Davis, and to see their dreams and the risks they took and what they became. And that was a wonderful experience for me. And then when I was at the Hall of Fame, I got to be with a big brand, the very best of the brand that is the NFL. And I got to knock on the door of those guys and tell them that they were going to Canton and thank them for all they'd done and all they were going to do for the game, but also to promise that we would keep their legacy forever. And when we did that, it was immediate. They all cried. And I got to see their journey. When that happens, Joe, they're not thinking about how much money they're going to make or how much money they made or their Lombardis or their records. Every one of them was thinking about the mom that drove them to practice, or their dad that wouldn't let them quit, or the coach that inspired them to be more. And to me, that was something really special. And when we hit on this knock on the door thing, you could see how much it meant to them. And the truth is that everyone's got a legacy. You've got a legacy. Every one of your viewers has a legacy. And it may not be as a Hall of Fame football player having their bronze bust in Canton. It may be as a soldier. It may be as a leader. It may be as a as a husband or a mother, as a father. And that legacy is important. And I had so many great experiences. I was fortunate to knock on the door of about 70 Hall of Famers. And that moment where they learned that they were going into the Hall of Fame. Sometimes they were surrounded by families, sometimes they were alone. But during COVID, we went to Calvin Johnson's house, Megatron, for the Detroit Lions. And it was 10 o'clock at night. And he was supposedly having a family meeting on Zoom because they wanted all to be together on Zoom and see it. And we knocked on his door, and it's dark and it's cold. And he comes to the door, and he knows why I'm there the minute he sees me. And he cries. And when I asked him, afterwards we asked him, what advice he would have for the kids in the neighborhood he grew up. He said, my advice would be to work hard, stay positive, and if you put together enough good days, he says, you might have a day like today. And to me, that's the answer to it. There's a verse that Tony Dungy had given me that I'm very fond of, Romans 12:21. It says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil by doing good. The answer to all our frustrations, the answer to all of our disappointments, the answer to all of the challenges, to all of the confusion that's out there in the world that we have to deal with sometimes, keep doing good. Don't be overcome by evil, just keep doing good. And if you do, you're going to end up in someone's Hall of Fame. It may be the NFL, it may be the military, it may be your family's Hall of Fame, it may be God's Hall of Fame. But just keep doing good.
That's talking about the knocks. Being military, 20 years, been in combat. I have not been able to watch a single knock with a dry eye, just because of the emotional moment of that. What's the origin of the knock?
Yeah, when I came to the hall, and I got there in January of 2014, and my predecessors actually, they get the credit for. And they had this idea of they wanted to bring all the NFL was starting the honor show, which at that time was the night before the Super Bowl, Saturday night. Now it's on Thursday night for programming reasons. But what they want to do is bring the 18 finalists together and put them in a hotel. And the day before, on Saturday, we would bring in 48 of the elite writers, and it's done a little bit differently now. It's done virtually now because of what was learned during COVID. But all these writers, it was Peter King, Sal Palantonio, just the best in the business, they come into a room and we debate those 18s, and they generally pick 4 to 8. Most often they'd pick 8 if they could, but you have to get 80% of that vote to become a Hall of Famer. 80% is enormous. I mean, our Congress can't do it on a simple majority. And could you imagine if they had to do 80%, nothing would ever get done. Right. But you have to get 80% of these guys to make it into the hall. And so they got this. And then what we were going to do for this first time is we would call them at 6 o'clock at night. We work all day long. At 6 o'clock at night, we would have to get them across town to Radio City Music Hall, to show up. And they would be introduced to this huge crowd and to the millions watching on TV as the new class of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And it's the high point, right in the middle of the show. It's the high point of the show. And so, as always, it was hard work, and these journalists are dedicated and they believe in it. But it goes long. And so because it's long, we're calling guys. And the first one was Michael Strahan, because he lived in New York, and New York traffic being what it is, we had to get him through that traffic to Radio City Music Hall. The second one was to Derek Brooks, who's a real good, he's a friend. I love the guy, have enormous respect for him. I see his name on the list, so I want to call him a buddy. I want to tell him he's going to the Hall of Fame. The third one was to Ray Guy. Ray Guy was a punter for the Oakland Raiders. He had been eligible 29 years and had never made it. Wow. And I call him, and he almost didn't answer because I'm from area code 714, which is Orange County, California, and he's looking for 330, which is Canton, Ohio. And fortunately he did, and he's from southern Mississippi, and he says, yes, sir. And he said, Ray, this is Dave Baker. I'm the new press of the Hall. I said, and he said, yes, sir. And he said, it is my great pleasure. And I got that far, and I could hear him fall to the ground. I could hear his phone rattling around. His wife, Sandy's going, honey, baby, are you okay? And it's like 2 minutes, Joe, of her, trying to revive him. And I thought I'd killed my first Hall of Famer. I'd been on the job like 2 weeks, and I already killed one. But he finally gets up, and 2 minutes is an eternity when you're trying to get people to live TV. And he gets up and he goes, sir, I'm so sorry. He says, I'm not sure I understood until right now how much this meant to me. And we knew at that moment that we had to find a way of sharing that with other fans. Because like I said, at that moment, they're not thinking about anything but the journey and how hard it was to get there. We all, as fans, we think they fell out of bed great and they're there because they were bigger, faster, stronger, quicker. And in reality, every single one of them, except for maybe Randy Moss, he was incredible. But they were all incredible. And some of them were big, strong, fast, and quick, but every single one of them had to overcome enormous adversity. There is not a guy that made it there without enormous adversity. Brett Favre made it in 10 seconds. We didn't have to have a discussion. The way it's done is generally it's the newspaper in that town or the chief media group from that town gives a presentation to all the other journalists that are there who are voting on it. And the guy from the Green Bay Gazette gives up and says, well, I got a presentation on Brett Favre, but do you really need it? And I look around and I go, yeah, I don't think so. Let's move on. And in 10 seconds, he got elected. But when I knocked on his door, he knew I was going to knock on his door. I knew he was going to knock on his door when I got up that morning. But the guy was knocking on the door, and same thing with Peyton Manning, made it like that. But, Brett Favre has thrown more interceptions than any other quarterback in the history of the National Football League. There were a lot of hard days for Brett Favre to get there. There were a lot of times he played hard. There were a lot of times, by the way, he was drafted by Atlanta, and those guys didn't think he was going to be very good and traded him to Green Bay. There were a lot of people who said no to him. Peyton Manning, who came from a celebrated family, had an incredible career at the University of Tennessee. He throws, 5 interceptions, 6 interceptions in one of his first games. Okay? There's a lot of people thinking, he's a bust. But when you knock on the door for those guys, their respect for the game, the heart, the soul, the sinew, the sweat they put into their journey every day, the mental capacity to overcome the pressure and the adversities and the people telling them no, was so enormous that you could see in their eyes. The guy I was talking to was not the 45-year-old veteran marketing machine that, talented spokesperson that Peyton Manning is, or for that matter, Brett Favre. It wasn't that guy. When I'm talking to him, and again, this is very personal and it sounds dramatic, but it was really true. I got to feel it. When I got to see him, when I'm talking to those guys, I'm not talking to that 45-year-old mature marketing veteran. I'm talking to that 10-year-old kid that started the journey. And he's thinking, and Peyton Manning was thinking about his dad, and Brett Favre was thinking about his dad. And their moms and the coaches and the teammates that got him there. And it's almost like you could look into their eyes and feel their soul.
Yeah.
And so I love that. I just love that. And it was such a unique opportunity. But you also learn from that. If I'd gone to the Hall of Fame just because it was the worship of football heroes, I don't think I would have enjoyed that very much.
Right.
But I got to see real people who'd struggled with real things. Anthony Munoz grew up without a dad. Steve Largent, dad left and had an alcoholic stepfather. And I could go, Curtis Martin grew up in the poorest home in the poorest neighborhood in America. And I could go through every one of those guys. And again, Randy Moss showed up had never run track. He showed up at Marshall, and the track coach says, hey, you're pretty fast. Yeah, but running the 40 today. He runs the second fastest time in the country that year in the 40. So he was a beast.
Right.
But he had to overcome other problems.
Yeah.
And other trust issues and other things. And they overcame them to become great men. And what I found, and let me give you another one, if I could. Morten Andersen, the kicker. Morten Andersen came from Denmark as a 10-year-old exchange student, or excuse me, 10th grade exchange student. He comes from Denmark. One day he's playing soccer, he sees some other guys kicking these field goals, he goes, I can do that. 40 years later, he goes back to his hometown in Denmark. We went with him, and he's the all-time leading scorer in the NFL. Wow. But at some point, and I might get this a little wrong, and if he ever sees this, he'll correct me, but he was like, I think he was 40 years old, and he got cut by the New Orleans Saints, and he was 16 points away from the record. He then tells his wife, he says, hey, I'm going to stay in shape, somebody's going to pick me up, and I'm going to go get that record. And so he goes down to the park every day, he puts on his helmet, puts on pads, cleats, because he wants to kick in game-like conditions. And he's got a bag of 12 balls, and he's got this thing that holds it. And pretty soon he kicks all through the spring and the summer, and nobody's picked him up, and the season's beginning, but he's thinking sooner or later some kicker's going to miss, and he's going to get his opportunity. Now he's getting run off the field by Pop Warner kids who need the field, so he's kicking in between games. He does this for 2 years, faithfully, every day, out there doing it, and just believing that sooner or later he's going to get his shot. And at some point in time, he's a 42-year-old man with a pot belly, and he would be the first one to talk about it. He says he then gets a call by the Atlanta Falcons to be picked up, and he said there's 4 other flat-bellied young kids out there, and they kick in every field goal. He's there, he hits, and they pick him up. Wow! And he plays for another 4 or 5 years. And not only breaks the record, but extends it a long ways. And he goes back to Struers, Denmark. They name a street after him, which in Denmark they only do that if you're dead. They have a holiday so the kids don't go to school that day. The entire town meets that night for him to unveil his bronze bust again, his gold jacket, and to represent him in his ring. What I learned about that is not everybody's going to be able to be a Hall of Fame quarterback or be an NFL kicker that breaks the league record. But there are people like Morten Andersen who are home on their couch waiting for their call, and they're wondering if it's going to come, and they're wondering if they need to do the work to prepare for it, and they could be inspired by that story. There are guys like Peyton Manning who are going to throw 5 or 6 interceptions that first game. There are guys like Brett Favre who you're going to go someplace and that place isn't the right fit and they don't believe in you, but when you get the next shot, you're not going to give it up. And again, Brett Favre is that kind of guy, and so is Peyton Manning. They can throw 5 interceptions and still beat you because they're not going to give up and they're going to keep coming back. And all I can tell you is that's the attitude that I want in my sons. That's the attitude that I want in my daughters and my grandkids. Respectfully, that's the attitude that I want in my Army. Yes. Okay, and my military. That's the attitude that we want in our community leaders and our fathers and mothers. And so it was a wonderful platform, and what I saw was applicable to everyone. There's a, I hope this is okay to say, Joe, but there's a verse in Revelations 3:20, and it says, "Behold, I stand at the door and I knock, and if any man comes to the door, I will answer it. I will come in with him. I will sup with him, and I will be with him, and he with me." And I think for all of us, whether you play in the NFL or not, whether you're a Hall of Famer or you just got to play one play in the NFL, or whether you're just working as a military guy or as a businessman, someday we're going to have to be accountable for what we've done. And there's going to be a legacy to that. And I believe it's Jesus Christ and our God the Father who will be knocking on that door, and it's going to be a lot more important than Dave Baker knocking on your door. and that Hall of Fame is going to last a lot longer than even the one in Canton, Ohio. I'm told that bronze bust will be 40,000 years. Yeah. But when those 40,000 years are turned into dust, God's Hall of Fame just continues. And regardless whether you're a person in faith or not, the application still applies that every day of your life matters. If you're starting out as a junior football player in North Carolina, make every day your masterpiece. Fight for the best you can be that every day. If you're a sniper, if you're a logistics guy, if you're the guy who feeds the troops, make every day your best day. And that's how you lead a Hall of Fame life. That's how you can lead a legacy.
Today's episode is brought to you by OneBrief, the transformative software platform redefining operational planning and military staff workflows. Imagine operations that are fast, where commanders can react to changes instantly. Small, where one person can achieve the work of hundreds. Integrated, breaking down the barriers between headquarters for seamless collaboration. Automated, freeing staffs to focus on the most critical work. Offline, continuing operations even with unreliable connectivity. And smart, making decisions no human alone could imagine. OneBrief's platform unlocks this vision and will revolutionize how tomorrow's military operates. Founded by a team of veteran planners who saw a firsthand need for smarter collaboration tools, OneBrief is built to combat real-world challenges. Now, empower your team to do more with fewer resources and make smarter real-time decisions. To learn more, visit onebrief.com. That's ONEBRIEF.com. David, it's amazing sitting here listening to you talk. And I was thinking about just like the sequence of events. They got to this conversation right here. I was sitting in my kitchen one day and Luke Van Antwerp texted me and says, "Hey, let's go grab coffee." Yeah. And because I had just gotten back from Germany, I was a couple weeks out from it. I had just retired, and I said, "Sure, let's do it." And then he told me about this bowl game this weekend where you and I are sitting here talking. He says, I want to introduce you to my buddy, Rich McGinnis. Yeah. And so I talked to Rich. We meet. We do an event together at Fort Liberty with a bunch of All-Americans. And then Rich asked me to come to this game and to talk to the athletes. And we thought about it, and there was no plan. But I said, sure, I'll do it. And, you know, for the last 20 years, when I've done anything on an assignment, military assignment, I've had to leave my family at home. And so I talked to my wife, Amanda, and said, let's just bring the kids out. Let's make this a family event for the first time. And over the last 48 hours, since I've been here, I've been able to talk to these amazing kids from all over the country and do so with Emmett Smith standing 3 feet away from me, listening and encouraging me to continue talking as I'm telling a leadership story. Been able to sit here. I've heard your story so many times already from other people, and to sit here with my family in the room as we're doing this interview. We're all getting to learn from you. It's just amazing how those events happen, and it began by saying, yes, I'll do this thing for somebody else.
Joe, and let me, I don't know if this works for your viewer, but let me work on you for a second. Man, you're too young to retire. And you spent 20 years in the military. You learned lessons of, to me, there's only a couple places where you can learn how to be a man or, a very professional woman. And to me, so part of that is athletics. Part of that is the military. Some of that can be in a great family, and not everybody has a great family, and some of that can be through faith. To me, those are the 4 places where you can really learn about how to have a Hall of Fame quality life. And you're too young to retire, okay? But you've learned a lot of lessons in the military, and there's a lot of associations with the military. I mentioned the other day when I was addressing, in the opening ceremonies, the group here, Wellington said that the Battle of Waterloo had been won many years before on the playing fields at Eton, because they'd learned the discipline, the part of being a team. Douglas MacArthur, when he was superintendent of West Point, he had a plaque put on the playing fields there where they play. And it says, upon the fields of friendly strife are sown the seeds on different days, on different fields, shall bear the fruit of victory. Because you learn to compete. You learn that there are when you're with people that you love and you're all on the same page, you can be better. You can give yourself to something that's bigger than you. And by doing that, the miracle is that you don't lose relevance. You gain relevance by being a part of a better group. And that there are some things in life that are worth fighting for and even dying for. And that's our military. And while football's important and we love the NFL, hey, it's nothing compared to the guys who fight our battles for us. And some of those are on the field, some of those are in the air, some of those are on the field, some of those, like I said, are feeding, logistics, supplying, the accountants, that got to make all this happen. And everybody knows their role. And not everybody can be the quarterback or the wide receiver, the guys that score the touchdown. You need offensive linemen. You need, you need defensive players. You need people to pump up the balls and supply and equipment. But you learn to be a part of a team. And your family is going to be the best team you ever play on. You have a beautiful family. But, every year, I mentioned in the opening ceremonies, every year we had a close association with the Medal of Honor Society. There's, I think at the last count, about 300 of those guys that have won our highest award for gallantry and courage. There's been about 374 members of the Hall of Fame. There's been 330 million that have played the game, 5 million played in college, only 29,000 to ever play it in the NFL, to be paid for it. But there's only 374 bronze busts in the Hall of Fame. There's kind of an association, those guys, as I got to know those guys in the Medal of Honor Society, they're very humble guys. They feel the real heroes are the ones that didn't make it, and they feel that they wear that, that gold star and that blue ribbon. They feel that they wear it for the other guys, who didn't receive it. It's quite dramatic, and it's some of the same stuff that when you knock on the door, you see in my guys, about their journey. But as I got to know them, these are guys who did remarkable things against enormous deals, and you know them, and I'll try not to, but I could tell so many of their stories. But every year I'd invite 5, so I probably had about 40 or 50 guys there. I'd get them in a room with 140 Hall of Famers and maybe a couple partners and some members of my board and those 5 guys. And we would talk about the state of the Hall, but at some point I'd introduce those guys. When I introduced them, Emmitt Smith, Jerry Jones, Troy Aikman, Michael Irvin from the Cowboys, and all these other Hall of Famers, they all were on their feet because they knew the heroes of the playing field knew who the real heroes were. And when these guys lose a game, it might affect their paycheck. Sometimes they, they might tear a meniscus or a ligament, but they're not getting shot at, and they're not dying. And the stories that you could tell, I mentioned at the opening ceremonies, Mike Thornton. Oh my God, the things they've done. Or a guy from the Army, Clinton Romeshay, and Clinton, I'm sorry if you're watching, but Clinton's like 5'0" and maybe the tallest guy, the biggest man I've ever met, who was a master sergeant. The 4 guys in front of him come along, all of a sudden he's in charge. There's like 300 of the enemy that have an advantageous position. I think it was Cap Kendrick and
Cap Keating, yep.
Cap Keating, thank you for your and he told me, he said that was he'd been in for a long time, and he said that's the first day I was really a soldier. But at some point in time, they go to an Alamo position and they give up the fort, and he's got a number of guys dead. He's got a lot wounded. He's only got a few guys who aren't hurt, and he comes in and he says, I need 8 more guys. We're going to take our fort back. And he said all the wounded guys stood up. And you go, oh my God, where do we find guys like that? How do you find, Leroy Petrie, who gets shot in both legs. They got him up into a room, a wall, I think in Fallujah. 3 of his buddies are protecting him in this kind of triangle. And there's like 35, 40 of the enemy that's on him. This kind of improvised grenade gets thrown in here. And they can't see it because their back's turned. He can't stand up and get it. Crawls on his elbows, the only thing he's got left, grabs it, throws it away, but not before it severs his right leg and right hand and part of his leg. Where do you find guys like that? And they're just, respectfully, when you talk to them, they're common guys who are, yeah, they know fear. Matter of fact, they're scared to death. But they're doing it for the guy next to them. And they're in this together. And they did incredible things. And you know, what I found was almost all of them were high school football players. Or they might have been baseball or basketball, but somewhere they learned to be a part of a team. Somewhere they learned discipline. Somewhere they learned how to persevere. Somewhere they learned how to care about someone else so that it made them courageous, or the ability to give courage to somebody, which is encouragement. And it was just incredible to see these guys. And again, Leroy Petrie's a Cowboy fan, so when I introduce him, all he wants to do is talk to Troy and Emmett and Michael Irvin and the Cowboys. But to me, this is such a unique opportunity to not only make a difference in life, but to be somebody who impacts the lives of others. And so I think the great game of football that I love, but frankly, all of sports, the fields of friendly strife that MacArthur talked about. I don't think that's for the guys in the Hall of Fame. I don't think that's for the guys who get paid for it. But I think it's for guys like you, for the other guys that are doing this job in the military. And when I had an experience, and I don't mean to get political because I know there's all perspectives, but in 2016, and I think it was October 2016, President Trump was running for the first time, and his communication director was a lovely lady named Hope Hicks. Her dad was Paul Hicks, who was government relations for the NFL, and he called my communications guy, and they had this idea because no Republican had ever won the presidency without carrying Ohio, and our governor, John Kasich, was not too fond of Trump. They had run it against each other, and Kasich didn't like him, and all. So the question was, how could they come to Ohio and do something uniquely to Ohio and feel part of it? And everybody in Ohio loves the Hall of Fame, and he said, hey, would you shut the museum down and show him the museum, and would you get your picture taken with him? And I said, well, listen, we won't shut it down because people come from all over and we don't want to shut them out. But if he comes at 5 o'clock, we'll keep it open just for him, and the Secret Service can sweep it, and we'll show him around. And he said, well, is it okay would you show him around and have the pictures taken and show him to it? I said, glad to. But understand that we're not for profit. If Hillary wants to do it, we got to do it for her too. And they said, great. And he came in, he was very gracious. By the way, he talked a lot about playing on his high school football team at a military academy in the Bronx. I don't remember the name of it. But he learned a lot from that experience that impacts him, and I think certainly what he really went through taught him not to quit out of this. But at some point, we're overlooking our archives. And I had the opportunity to tell him how we really think America could be great again. Because we have, at the Hall of Fame, there were 6 million pictures, 40 million documents. And it was, there's a letter in there and other stuff relating to in 1905, there were 17 guys who died in college football that year. The college presidents were going to terminate the game because it gotten too dangerous. There were like 170 students injured. And it was just this huge battering ram of guys going at each other. And Roosevelt, who was the president at the time, felt that football and athletics, he believed in a rigorous life, and he believed in discipline, and was an outdoorsman. And he believed this was important for our young men at the time to be tough and to be, the Rough Riders, that you need in life. And he wanted to find a way to save football. So he had meetings at the White House, and he then prevailed upon Paul Daschle, who was a professor. He was the head referee for football in America, but he was a professor at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis. And he asked Daschle to prevail upon Walter Camp, who was the keeper of the rules at Yale. And they incorporated this thing called the forward pass. And today the game is all about the forward pass, but at the time it was to make the game safer. Instead of just beating each other to death, we could throw the ball on a couple of these plays, and you could advance it in a different way. And that saved the game of football, and it changed it into what it is today. But what I was able to say to then candidate Trump is that, 30 years later, you had all these young Americans, and now they're in the Pacific. They're in Africa, they're in Italy, they're in Normandy, and long before there was a cell phone, and they couldn't communicate with home, they were on the other side of the earth defending the free world. And Tom Brokaw called them the greatest generation, the guys of, Stephen Ambrose, with Band of Brothers, they told their incredible story. And these guys did remarkable things on the other side of the earth. And they had a decided advantage because a lot of them had played football or baseball, and they'd learned how to compete. They'd learned how to not give up. They learned how to get up when you get knocked down. They'd learned how to be a team and sacrifice for each other. And I believe that changed the world. And so, I think that certainly this unique relationship that the military and sports has together, and in particular, respectfully, football has together, is something really special that we have in America. And regretfully, we are a divided country, and some of that I think is because of this thing and the computer, where we can divide each other and we can scare each other into doing things. But sports is something that generally unites us. And what I've seen sports do in race, in the Civil War, there were 1.7 million casualties in the Civil War, but all of that sacrifice may not have meant quite as much as when Jackie Robinson put on a uniform through the Dodgers, or Marion Motley and Bill Willis and Woody Strode and Kenny Washington integrated the NFL. And people could see their character. My dad, as I mentioned briefly the other day, my dad was from Mississippi, so we got a lot of redneck in our background. We got a lot of trailers in our past. But my dad grew up in a different past where there was segregation. And you may work with somebody of a different race, but you didn't go into each other's house. My son's married to the most beautiful young African-American lady. I've got 2 interracial grandsons, so if my dad was alive, he would die for these guys. I love them so much. And what changed, it was, my son was a football player at USC, and he was the tackle in the Reggie Bush push game where they got the yard and won the game. He was also the tackle in the Texas USC national championship game at the Rose Bowl, where they went for it with 4th and 2 to run out the clock, and they only got 1 yard, and they lost the game. To my son, it doesn't matter whether you're black or white or Hispanic or Asian, or for that matter, if you're male or female or Republican or Democrat. If you can help him get a yard, you are his brother. You are attached at the heart together. And when Martin Luther King had that epic line, that was, he had been to the mountaintop, he had a dream that someday his 4 children would be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Our business was a little pretty easy, frankly, because it was characters measured by the yard. If you're an offensive lineman, if you can help me get 1 more yard, that's the test of our character. If you're defensive, you can keep it. But if you're in the military, it might be that hill, it might be that strategic objective. But it is all about being together. And that person that's next to you, it's much more about your heart and your character than it is about the color of your skin or your politics or a lot of other things. So I just think there's athletics in the military have been a long history that goes long before. It's not just PT and physical preparation. It's the values and virtues and the life lessons that you learn in the game that will help you not only in sports, but in the military and certainly in all of life.
I've got 2 final questions for you. First question is, how has the knock, your love of the game, you've changed so many lives over your course of time as a director of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. How has that changed you, or how has that affected you?
Well, that's another great question. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. Well, first of all, it's very difficult to walk down a hallway in a hotel room because, people think, oh my God, is he coming? And I've actually had people follow me as I go down the hotel room hallway thinking I might be knocking on a door. It's difficult as I'm switching planes in the airport sometimes, so people want their picture taken and they talk, and sometimes I've been standing at the urinal and the guy next to me wants a picture. Let's get outside first, okay? but it's nice because it shows it's impacted a lot of other people. But the way it's impacted me is that, once you've had a part of something that's really good, you want more. Most of my life I've been a 400-pound man, and what that means is German chocolate cake. If I get a little, I got to eat it all, okay? But when you find out how something, it's not about, okay, you kind of been visible and now you want to be famous. What it is you see how it touches people's lives, and you want to touch more lives. You want to encourage more people. Whether they're in the NFL, out of the NFL, wherever they all have a legacy, like I say, and they all have a journey. And how can we help that? And so now, at my old age, I should be playing golf. We've got, Colleen and I have 4 kids, 10 grandkids, 2 great grandkids. I should be playing golf and traveling, but I've traveled enough, and we're kind of starting something called World Youth Sports. And our objective is to raise some funds, buy as many youth sports organizations as we can, roll them up and provide them the most professional sports management expertise we can, both to the business and the youth experience, for the kids, for the parents, for the communities, and really do what the NFL has done over their 104 years with NFL films and sponsorship and content and make that experience so that we teach these values and virtues to everyone in a very ecumenical way. And sometimes, again, I'm a faith-based guy, but sometimes if I give my Christian testimony, there's a certain portion of people that aren't into that. But if I talk about sports and the lessons in that, I got about 98% of them, okay? So how can we use this as a vehicle to teach those lessons, to bring us together, to make our country whole again, and to make it okay for us to disagree, because frankly, we're still going to be on the same team. And we're still together. And if I can help you, I can help your kids. And if you can help me, you can help my kids. And Reagan said that freedom is always one generation away from extinction. And Kennedy had that great ideal that, how can we get to the moon by the end of the decade to beat the Russians? What we really want to do is we want to build better people.
There's, I didn't plan to talk about this at all, but at some point, I'd love to get you down there in North Carolina, right outside the gates of Fort Liberty. There's a league called Rise Up Moore County, and it's essentially run by
Andy Davis.
Yes.
Okay. Paula Van Antwerp was telling me about last night and said, you got to meet this guy.
Yeah.
And I'd love to do it.
And all the coaches are all special forces and military leaders who are instilling the same values that I'm hearing you talk about.
Joe, there's so many values. And again, we'd love for those guys to go into our military. I'm a big believer in, Israel has, and again, please forgive me, my family had no military background. The Van Antwerps, I think it's required to serve in the military to be in their family, okay? I had none of that, so I missed that experience, and I was a good enough college athlete and a good enough college student that, I kind of, my draft number was not very high, and I went to play basketball and did athletics, and it got me through college and law school. But since then, twice we took 20 Hall of Famers and their wives to Israel. Where they have mandatory military service. And it was fascinating to see. And by the way, once we took 10 Hall of Famers in a private audience to the Pope, and he doesn't know the difference between Jerry Jones or Jerry Rice, but he knows that sports brings people together, and he knows that gold jacket means something. But in Israel, we just had an event at my house where a young man who was a 28-year-old. We had the president of American football in Israel, which is right outside Tel Aviv there, and he brought with him one of his commanders in Special Forces, 28-year-old guy who had just been in Gaza after the October 7th massacre. And so he's doing some tough duty in Gaza. They give him a leave to go participate in because he's on the national flag football team, in the championships in Europe. They didn't want Israel to compete as Israel for security reasons, so I think they called it Team Anui and Team Ariel, I believe, which were the two youngest hostages that had been taken on October 7th. He was on the Team Ariel, I believe, that won for all of Europe. So it was an amazing moment of victory. He then has the permission to come to my house to talk to a lot of people I gathered. And he was quite honest. He says, hey, we got to fight to defend our homeland. It's a tough neighborhood, and we need a margin of safety. But he also said, for every terrorist we kill, we create 20 more.
Right.
And when I was in Israel, I saw 3 Palestinian offensive linemen who were protecting a Jewish quarterback. And when they were in the huddle, you didn't know the difference. And I've always believed, Joe, that, and again, I have great respect and gratitude to our military and the brave men and women who defend us on the other side of the earth. But I've always felt that if we spent more money on balls and whistles, we'd probably have to spend a lot less money on guns and grenades and missiles. And if we can teach the children of the world to play together. So in my old age, if you talk about how this has changed my life, I want to use what years I've got left. Just like I understand Andy Davis is there, and I look forward to meeting him someday or talking to him. But he wants to use his time after the military to make a difference in kids' lives. And again, if you get to the kid, you get to the family. You own that house. And if you own that house, you own that community. And if you own that community, you might own the country. And if you own the country, you might own the world. And so our mission at this organization, we're going to launch in a couple months here, and we've got some wonderful financial backing for it. It's called World Youth Sports. And our mission is to bring the children of the world together to make a difference beyond any imagined. And our vision is to take the highest level of sports management, things that we've learned at the NFL and in minor league baseball and in NASCAR and the other things. We're going to take the highest level of sports management and we're going to bring it to the youth sports experience and business to create a trusted and dominant brand. And the ethos, our reason for doing this, is that we've really learned, I think, that the only way to impact homelessness or poverty or crime or addiction or racism or anti-Semitism is to get the kids before they get there. And if we can fill them up first with health, happiness, hope, honor, and even love, we can make a difference. In California, we've spent, I think, $24 billion over the last 3 years on homelessness, and during that time, homelessness has doubled. But if we change the heart of that kid, if we can change the support that's around him, we might just change the world. And so it's changed what I'm doing. I hope till the day I lie, and nothing against all you golfers out there, but instead of playing golf or being on a cruise somewhere, I hope we can impact some kids and some families.
That is amazing. Well, speaking of families, I think I've recorded to this point 140 episodes of this podcast. This is the first one that my daughter, my wife, and my son are in the room for. So as a parent, and there's a lot of parents that listen to this show whose kids are getting into sports, what advice would you have for us as we try to raise our kids through this changing landscape, which is youth sports?
For a lot of us baby boomers, the greatest generation where those guys were coming back from World War II, and they had all these baby boomers, and we had all these advantages, and then we wanted our kids to have more advantages than we have. Let me tell you, I think in my old age I've learned, and I've had wonderful conversations with Hall of Famers. Jim Brown may be the greatest player to ever play the game of football, and I got to know him when he was from 75 to 84. And man, there's conversations I've had with him that I would have walked to the other side of the earth. But I think now that I'm older, I've learned that, man, what I want for my kids and for my grandkids, I want them to be resilient. I want them to be compassionate and caring, but I want them to be tough enough that they're going to persevere. I want them to never give up, and I don't want them to be too comfortable. I want them to be challenged, and I want them to grow, and I want them to care. I want them to care deeply, and I want them to have some. I don't want them to be fighters every day, but I want them to have the discernment and discretion to know that there are things that are worth fighting for and even dying for. And if you want your kids to be successful, if you want them to be healthy, they may break some bones and sprain some muscles, but if you want them to be healthy in life, to be successful, if you want them to be happy, get them on a team. Get them with the best coach you can find. Be part of that team. Support the coach. Learn those lessons together. Be part of that community. And again, I don't want to end on a down note, but I think it's a special note. One of the things I learned when I was at the Hall of Fame, and one of the things I've learned from my association with the military, again, I never served, but as I get older, man, one of the great regrets I've got in life is that I didn't. I was an athlete, I was recruited by some of these academies, and I didn't go, and now I wish I had. And the reason is because I see that they are a team. They got politics, they got frustrations, they got problems, just like anybody else. But they're a team. And when many guys leave the military, I've talked to guys on the teams. I had a wonderful discussion. And I'm sorry to talk so long, but you got me going here, Joe.
Good.
And again, forgive me. It's sometimes being visible, and I'm not as visible as some, but I was visible enough, and I'm this big, and I'm hard to hide. When I'd get on a plane, I'd be exhausted, and I was hoping I could sleep. And I get on this plane, and some other guy wants his picture taken with me. So the guy next to me, we decompressed, I kind of fall asleep a bit, and when I get up, and the guy goes, "Hey, I Googled you." And I said, "What?" And he says, "Yeah, I Googled you. I know who you are." And I'm thinking, okay, now I'm going to have to talk football for 2 hours here. Let's go. And I talked to him, and he was I'm saying, relatively young, 45-year-old guy who had been a Navy SEAL. And I said to him, as I often do, and I've learned to do, and sincerely mean, I said, "Thank you for your service." And I've said that a million times, and you've probably heard it a million times, and I thank you for your service. But to my great surprise, this guy responded by saying, "On the contrary, Mr. Baker, thank you as a taxpayer for paying for the greatest education I've ever had." He says, "I've learned things that I could have never learned anyplace else." And so all of a sudden I sit up in my chair a little bit, and I said, "Really, tell me about that." And he says, "Well, Mr. Baker, it's not the NFL, but with the SEALs, we don't call them platoons, we don't call them units, we call them teams. And our objective is not to get any guy to be a hero. Our objective is to get every guy to do 90% of what he does best." And I'm just fascinated. And so it was like playing tennis, value or virtue tennis, because he would talk about something in the Navy SEALs, and I would talk about how it impacted the NFL, and he would then take that and talk about how it works with the military. And it was one of the best conversations I've ever had with anybody. And this guy has gone on to build a security company that is former Special Forces and SEALs guys that do what they do really well, and it's a successful company for him. And to me, all I know is I left that thinking, man, I need to pay more taxes, not less, if I can find guys like this out there. And so, listen, I really think for all those guys, we have such an opportunity ahead of us, not only to just build a kick-butt military that's going to beat everyone, but to build a military with people that are changing the world, to help them be young athletes. So for those parents, I'd say get them on a team. And when you're on a team, you have a purpose, you have people in your life, and you have a passion for living it. And isn't that what we want for all of our kids?
Well, David, thank you so much for your time today. This was amazing. And again, this was an awesome opportunity. This is the first thing post-military that I've been able to actually share with my family. So thanks for doing that.
You've got a beautiful family, and I was telling your wife you need to have more kids. These guys are beautiful, and you've got one of them that's on a team doing exactly what I've been talking about, and I'm going to follow that. But what I would say, Joe, is that verse that Tony Dungy gave me one time. It was after the George Floyd deal, and we're all separated, and there was kind of a fear and an anger in our country. And his whole deal was Romans 12:21. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil by doing good. So Joe, you're too young to retire. You got a lot of people whose lives you can impact and change. You can make a difference beyond any imagined, okay? And just keep doing good, okay?
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you again for listening to another episode of From the Green Notebook podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please give us 5 stars wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps us gain visibility and the opportunity to help more people on their leadership journey. Also, make sure you check out our website at www.fromthegreennotebook.com. There, you can listen to past episodes, read leadership articles written by military leaders from around the world. You can sign up for our monthly reading list email where you can learn about new books that are coming out, and our Sunday reflection email that comes out every Sunday morning. Is really short. It's a 2-minute read, but I guarantee you it's going to start your week off on the right foot. Finally, make sure you follow us on Twitter at FTGN Notebook, and you can find us on Instagram and Facebook by searching for From the Green Notebook. Again, thank you so much for coming on this journey with us. I am humbled by the opportunity to learn these lessons alongside you. So please join us next week for another episode of From the Green Notebook, where we're going to help you lead with the best version of yourself.
I can't